This is a general introduction into the modeler, the development app of SAP Data Intelligence. Here we define all objects that a graph or pipeline needs. The pipeline is the executable that processes the data. Although the design is pretty much self-explaining, to get an overview about all the major facets might be helpful, even for developers or data engineers who had already written a couple of pipelines. But before we get to the content, a few words about me. I'm a product manager for SAP Data Intelligence and educated as a physicist for computational physics, as it was called 30 years ago. And my heart lies definitely with development and big data. First, we start with an overview of the architecture. This helps you to understand some of the features in the modeler. SAP Data Intelligence is built on top of Kubernetes. You have a cluster of nodes in which the pods are running. In the right bigger rectangle, I have depicted nodes as smaller rectangles. A pod is a container, in our case a Docker container, in which the processes run. You could have many pods running on a node. A pipeline runs within one or many containers or pods. The whole orchestration where the pods run is managed by Kubernetes. When you build a pipeline, first a matching base container is selected from the internal Docker registry. The matching process is using the tags that the operators or the pipelines have. For example, specific machine learning packages or integration packages. If your pipeline allows parallel processing, you can run the same pipeline on multiple pods just with a click. You can also run a pipeline on many pods with different container when there is no Docker image that can serve all the requirements of all operators. The only restriction is the computational capacity, memory and CPU of the nodes. This needs to be considered, for example, if you cannot stream big data but keep all data in memory. For the number of the nodes, though, we provide an autoscaling. Now let's go into the system. We start the modeler first. Before I introduce you into the general UI of the modeler, I like first go to the Docker repository. Oh, here we are already. And to the Docker files. And here you see there is already a custom Docker file, SciPy. And here you see there are additional Python packages that I have added. And you also see there is a base image that I'm using, on top of which I implemented or installed the packages. Let's have a look to the base package. So we go to com, where you find all the images that SAP provides, and we go to the SUSE Linux Enterprise Edition and base and the Docker, and here you see the same without the packages. And you also see, okay, there is a newer version used. Maybe I have to adjust my custom Docker file. The tags, okay, let's go back to the custom operator. The tags of the Docker file are defined here on the right top corner. And you see all the tags that are required or that this image serves. And you also see that I have added tags for SciPy and GeoPy because this is an image that is required for some of the operators. So, but now let's start with the plain modeler for the introduction into the UI. On the left, we have the navigation pane with the different tabs. By clicking on the tab, you get the details. The Graphs or Pipeline tab. Here I use the terms synonymously. Here you see plenty of examples how to implement pipelines. It's always a good start to looking if a graph has been developed that are close to your planned ones, or how to use certain operators. So I use it, for example, for the Generation 2 operators development. The Operators tab. In the operator space we have two different kinds, Generation 1 and Generation 2. The details of the differences I will highlight in a couple of minutes. You see there are sections or classifications based on how to use the operators. Here, for example, ABAP and audit. This is a section I have created for my custom operators. Sometimes you cannot switch between Generation 1 and Generation 2 operators. The reason is that you have opened a pipeline, and this pipeline defines which operators you can use. So if you want to switch, then you have to close either all pipelines or go to a pipeline that has operators of the operators that you want to see. Then we have the replication, I will not touch, and here the repository. This is a kind of folder structure of your user workspace. Here you see all the newly created objects like operators and pipelines. Here the graphs and the pipelines, the operators I have created are here because I'm using mostly Python operators are here. This is also the place where you can import and export solutions from or to your local file system. You can also check in the objects into your solution repository. This is the way of sharing your objects via a central repository to other users or roles. If you don't need a version control like Git, then this is the way to implement a CI/CD process. Mark the objects and export as a solution with a version number. So here we have, for example, audit, and this one audit, and then you can export as a solution, and then you give the details, the metadata. The configuration types, the next tab, defines the data structure of configurations. An example I give in the video about how to develop Generation 2 operators. Admittedly, I rarely use this. My configuration parameters are mostly simple scalars. And finally, we have the data types, where we find the famous virtual types for the Generation 2 operators. There you find three different types. First, the structures. These are data dictionaries or records, and these are mostly used for the headers. Then we have the tables, so the data structure with columns, and we finally have the scalars, the basic data types. On the bottom pane, you get the details of the runtime engine. The status tells you which of your pipelines are running, completed, etc. When clicking on the pipeline, you get the details in the editor pane. This feature we will examine later. Then we have the logs file with the filter, the schedule that lists or would list all the scheduled graphs, the validation. Here you get the information on graph level if all is valid, and finally the Git terminal. The new Git terminal, where you have a version control of your developed objects and can upload them to a remote repository. Currently, it is a terminal with all the Git commands. It is open yet if there is a demand of the developers of our customers, if an additional UI support is demanded. I personally do not like to sacrifice the richness of the Git commands to the limitations of any UI. Finally, we have the editor pane here in the center, where you put together your pipelines. Let's open a graph, HANA to file, and you can access the configuration parameters of this pipeline here on the top right corner, where you can change the description or you can add resources to the pipeline to restrict the memory and the CPU. And you can also define data types that are specific for this pipeline. There is also a JSON representation where you can change parameters that not are accessible in the UI. So for example, you could also add your own icon with the icon source key. And finally, we have the help, the documentation of this graph. And this you can change for every pipeline you create by your own. You just have to upload a README file into the graph folder. Let's go back to the diagram. And the same you have for the operators. So we can go to the operator and the parameters, and then you have the parameters for each of the operators. Here you see the label of the operator for this HANA table, and that you can then change. And you also see that we have substitution parameters with a dollar character and the curly braces, and this enables you to basically enter the parameter when you start the pipeline. So now let's start the pipeline. Because we have seen that there are parameter substitutions, we are asked to enter these parameters. We can also change the trace levels from info to debugging, for example. Here we have to enter the output file. In my case it is S3 catalog, and we will store it to temp my books, and the configuration is a HANA demo and the table name my books. We can save this as a default run configuration, and what you also see here is that that you can also add snapshot parameters, so that tells the runtime engine how many snapshots should be done and how often it should recover. So here we see that the HANA to file has run and now already has completed. Now we could be a bit more creative and build a pipeline from scratch that reads from a HANA database and saves the data to an object store. So almost the same process as the previous one. So we go to Graphs and Add, and we have to select Use Generation 2 operators. So for the difference of Generation 1 and Generation 2 operators, I will come later. So, and here we select first a table consumer This belongs to the structured data operators. This will read a table from a database. Then we select file producer, and the graph terminator. And we will connect all operators. And now we can configure the operators. And here you see it's more elaborate, the configuration. So we go into selection of the HANA database, of the databases, and we select the HANA database. We select the connection. It is HANA demo. And we go to the source. And here you see the database. So there is also already a lookup into the database. And here we select demo. And I think it is my book that we have chosen the last time. And again, the metadata is read, so we see what we have. We could even do a data preview. So it's a very convenient way to develop pipelines and using these operators. Okay, and then let's go back and go to the structured operators. Again, we go here into the configuration and we choose an S3 object store, and it's an S3 catalog and the target, and we select temp and add a new and call it my books CSV. Add. Okay, and here you also see that the V types of the previous operator is already used, and yeah, then we save the graph. Test db to file, db to file. Okay. So after saving, we can now start the pipeline, and we see it's pending, and soon it will change to running and then to completed. So now let's go back to the previous pipeline and add an error. So I go to the script here, and there is, I have already prepared this. So I will send a wrong type to this function, and I save this. This is an embedded script. Oh, that's the wrong one. I save this, and now I run the graph, and you will see it runs into an error. We can go and have a look to the overview of the details, and you see already a lot of information where the error, what the root cause of the error is, so in line 32. But we can also go to the trace and have a look to the log file, and here you see it's quite a long log file, and there you get a bit more information what went wrong, and then you can change accordingly. Now let's have a short intermediate remark about the two kinds of operators that we have. As already mentioned, there are generation 1 and generation 2. The generation 2 operators are available since beginning of Q1 2022, and all new operators will be of this type. And the important operators of generation 1 that make sense in the context of generation 2 will be migrated sooner or later. But what are the benefits of this new type? So with the second generation operators, we've got a lot of crucial features that helps us writing more secure pipelines. The five most important ones are listed on this slide. First, we have the interconnectivity. This enables you basically connect all generation 2 operators, provided they have compatible port types. Robustness. With the new V-types, we can type safely connect operators and ensure at design time the compatibility. Resilience. Now we can define stateful operators. That means that you can store the operator state as a snapshot. Once a pipeline has stopped accidentally or paused, the last state of the operator can be restored when the pipeline execution is resumed. Fourth, we have coherence. The messages passed between operators contain, in addition to the data, separate metadata that can be used to manage the pipeline execution. For example, assign messages as last batch. And finally, we have messages and stream types of data flows that are supported. There are some more deep technical enhancements, but this would go beyond this short introduction. So now we come to the next level of development with the developer, with the modeler. Developing new custom operators. There are two types, either a script that is embedded into a pipeline and therefore cannot be reused by other pipelines, or separate new custom operators. The first type we encountered already with the first pipeline, where we have changed the code. So let's go to this pipeline and to the JSON representation. And here in line 97, you see the script that is embedded into this pipeline. To start with a separate custom operator, you need to go to the tab Operators and Add. And here you have to enter the names of the new operator and the display name and the base operator. And for custom generation 2, you only have, in addition to the ABAP, you have the Python operator to have all the features of generation 2. For the sake of time, I now switch to a already created operator. So let's close this dialog and open a pipeline I have already created. Go into the edit mode, and then you see all the dialogues or questions that you have to go through to create a new operator. So it starts with the ports. So you have you have input ports and you have output ports, and you see each port has a name and a data type, and you have the Scala structure and table data type. So these are the V types that we have seen previously. And then you can either add a wildcard. That means the type is not defined at design time, but it has to be defined at runtime, of course. And or you can add an existing V type. Then we have the tags. So in case you need packages, special packages, and therefore special containers, then you need to add the tags you need. Then you have the configuration, and here you can add all the parameters for a configuration. And let's just have a short look here, and then you can add the name, the title, the type, and so on. And this is what then later can be used in the script and can be entered in the configuration that we have seen already. And then we have the script, and here you see the script. I do not want to go into the details how to write a script, so there are some framework knowledge that you need to know. This is something that I describe in a separate blog or a video, but it's quite easy. So you have to, this is a rather long one, but there is a callback function, and there you add all the coding. And finally, of course, you can document your operator. The past 25 minutes, you've got an overview on the modular UI and how you can develop pipelines, and even got the glimpse on custom operators. We've gone through the tabs on the left and all the development objects, touched the runtime engine pane at the bottom, the configurations of pipelines and operators. We have peeked into the JSON representation of the objects and into the logging. So it was quite a lot in such a short time, and I may beg your pardon. What's left? Thank you for listening, and I wish you a happy coding.